Hello and welcome to SpeakEasy. We have a special guest with us, former External Affairs Minister Yashwant Sinha. And the world has changed a lot since Mr. Sinha was External Affairs Minister soon after in the early 2000s. At that time, I also covered the External Affairs Ministry as a young reporter. The world has indeed moved on to momentous changes. And I will refer only to two changes that I'm talking about. One is the genocide, the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And the second is the war between Russia and Ukraine in Ukraine, a kind of a mindless war. We see that the UN system is close to collapse. It's unable to interfere and intervene in the major crises of the world. So what I want to ask you, welcome Mr. Sinha to SpeakEasy. What I want to ask you is that you've been you may not have been minister, but you're watching the world very closely. How do you see the situation currently in the world?
Well, as you said, in the last 20 odd years, the world has changed completely. And you refer to the fact that I was External Affairs Minister in the early 2000s. I must confess that I am totally outdated now because the situation then and the situation today are vastly different from each other. We have now the great disruptor of all that is, sacred in international relations, the man sitting in the White House who respects nothing, no traditions, no precedents. He only wants to act the way he feels like acting. And in the process, the world has undergone a great deal of change. There was a time, Amit, when I thought that the international organizations like the UN, the other powers, the superpowers, other powers were strong enough to prevent a war from happening. And if a war did happen, then they'll bring it to a close very soon. I was clearly wrong. Maybe I was thinking in the context of India-Pakistan, but I was clearly wrong because you refer to the genocide in Gaza. It's a horrible, horrible thing that has happened in today's world, today's civilized world. And, there are major powers which have just kept quiet, including India, for instance. We have not condemned Israel for the inhuman activities that they have carried out in Gaza, killing scores of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people. And the world has just looked on. Similarly, you refer to the conflict, the war, in fact, in Ukraine. And that also has just gone on. It's just going on. Now, Mr. Trump has woken up to the situation and is trying to bring peace in both these places. So he has some kind of a plan for Gaza. He's been a real estate man, so he's thinking in terms of real estate there. But I hope to God that he succeeds in Ukraine, and the senseless killing and destruction which is going on there for years is brought to an end. But, in all this, I find that the United Nations, and especially its Security Council, has become completely redundant. They have taken...
In fact, on the issue of the Security Council, Mr. Sinha, I wanted to ask you that this new resolution that the Security Council passed, creating the so-called International Stabilization Force for Gaza. Interestingly, Russia and China abstained from that vote. So in a sense, they have also given the green signal to Mr. Trump's plan, who has made no bones about the fact that he looks at Gaza as a piece of real estate to be developed. So what is your sense? I mean, are countries simply going by their own national interest? It doesn't matter that you should do the right thing as far as international affairs is concerned. And especially as you pointed out, the civilized world is clearly watching silently what's happening even today in the name of the ceasefire in Gaza.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, there are other areas of conflict. Sorry. Sudan is a bad example. Where the conflict has been going on and people have been killing each other, and the international community has just looked on. So, um, the point I was making was, one, the UN has become toothless. It will adopt a resolution which has been prepared by the US. It will not have a resolution of its own. If it does, then it's just becoming a copycat of the US, and also proving the point that the other countries matter far less than the US does. That's not a good situation, because then we'll be back to the superpower days. And in today's world, there is only one superpower, and that country, the US, will dominate everyone. So multipolarity has become a victim. Other countries have ceased to matter. And I'm particularly sorry about India's role in all this. India has been just quiet onlooker. We have not spoken on Gaza. We have not condemned the killings in Gaza. And we had a chance to be a peacemaker in Ukraine also, because we enjoyed some confidence of both sides. But we have just kept quiet. And apart from beating our own drum that we are Vishwa Guru, we have not done anything to show that we really have an international role, which is very sad, because India has always had an international role, and especially in conflict situations. So that is a sorry part of it.
What is your sense? I mean, coming to India now, I mean, as you rightly point out, that India has been silent on Gaza, the massacre of the Palestinians. But I would also want to ask you very specifically, I think when we first met, it was at an ASEAN meeting in Thailand. I recall that you were there when India was courting ASEAN. And then we see that Prime Minister Modi chose not to travel to Kuala Lumpur recently because he was obviously afraid of meeting Donald Trump. That's the sense, at least I have. I don't know how you see it, but he just didn't go for such a major international meeting. How do you see this, Mrs. Sinha?
We started with quoting Trump. We started by telling the world that he was a great personal friend of Mr. Modi, until somewhere down the line, things got derailed. And Trump has spoken over 50 times now that he has been responsible for bringing the ceasefire between India and Pakistan, as far as that short 4-day war or conflict was concerned. Now, Prime Minister Modi has not contradicted it. Government of India may have, but Prime Minister Modi has not contradicted it. And now, unfortunately, we have come to a situation where Mr. Modi is clearly avoiding going to any international meet where Trump is likely to be present. So it is not merely in Kuala Lumpur that he did not go. He also did not go to Gaza. You'll remember that there was this meeting in Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh. Mr. Modi did not go there. So the impression or the message which has gone to the world and to the US is that Mr. Modi will now in future avoid any meeting where Mr. Trump might be present. He went to South Africa for the G20, where he was convinced that Trump was not coming.
So what is your sense? I mean, the thing is that Mr. Modi's projection is of a very strong leader. I mean, that's his domestic projection, especially. So is it that he's unable to cope with meeting Mr. Trump? We also saw Xi Jinping meeting Donald Trump in Seoul recently, when the APEC meeting happened, and his body language was one of complete confidence. So how does this marry with his domestic image, really?
No. You can't compare China and India. I mean, China is far, far ahead of us in every which way. And therefore, when President Xi met Trump, he met Trump as an equal. And Trump also met him as an equal. This is a great, great change which is taking place in international relations, because China and US are coming closer. India had used to have a relevance in the past because India was looked upon by the rest of the, or at least the Western world, as a counterpoise to China in Asia and elsewhere. Now that advantage seems to be slipping out of our hands because US and China are making up. And US and China are making up. In fact, they're also talking in terms of a G2, that they will be dominating the world. India is nowhere in this picture. I'd like to also point out to you that when I was in External Affairs Ministry, I had traveled to Brasilia, in Brazil, where the foreign ministers for India, Brazil, and South Africa had met, and we had created an organization called IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa. And after a very long time, I found this time when Mr. Modi was in South Africa, that a meeting of IPSA had taken place. Why was IPSA created? IPSA was created because we wanted another grouping, which was not burdened by being too large, but a small grouping, transcontinental, of important countries, each one of them claimant to a permanent seat in the UN Security Council, coming together, and apart from in fostering or furthering relations between themselves, also play a role at the international level. Now, why couldn't IPSA play a role as far as Gaza is concerned? Why couldn't India take the initiative in IPSA to do this? Why didn't
because India is today completely married to Israeli policies. I mean, we have Israeli ministers visiting India at a time when the genocide is going on.
That's the saddest part. That is the saddest part. So, I mean, where do we stand? I don't know. But clearly, India is not playing the role internationally that India had played in the past and India was supposed to play in today's world.
Mr. Sinha, a lot of emphasis has been put by successive prime ministers on our relationship with the United States. One can always say that Donald Trump is different from other US presidents, but we have to deal with him for the next, 3.5 years. What is your sense? I mean, a man like Donald Trump, he has put tariffs on us at 50%, while our neighbor Pakistan is tariffed at 19%. Well, how is this? I mean, how is it that Pakistan's star has really risen with the US in the last, 8, 10, 11 months? And as Pakistan's star is rising, it seems that India's star is going down. I mean, how do you account for this?
This I consider as a major failure of our diplomacy in recent months. And you mentioned Pakistan. Pakistan had the best of relations with China. And in the 4-day war, you were aware of the role which was played by China. In fact, our army people are saying that it was China we were fighting and not Pakistan so much. But surprisingly, that Pakistan, almost a failed state, controlled by Field Marshal Munir now, that Pakistan has become the darling of the US. Munir has been invited to the White House twice. And it seems that he's getting along very well with President Trump. So, here we have a situation where Pakistan is very close to China. Pakistan is also now very close to the US. And both these superpowers are courting Pakistan, helping Pakistan in every which way. And we seem to be isolated. So, this is, of course, it was our policy that moving from the Cold War era, we will also have good relationship with the US. And when Mr. Vajpayee was Prime Minister, you are aware of the fact that we actively followed that policy with very good outcomes. Now, and when Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister, then we had the nuclear deal and all that. But somehow, in this Trump too, we seem to have lost that direction. And we have unfortunately come to a situation where the leaders of these two countries, especially India, the leader is avoiding meeting Trump.
And what is your sense, Mr. Sinha? We saw, soon after the tragic incident in Pahalgam, we saw the Prime Minister repeatedly saying that we are going to do something. And obviously, the Pakistanis were prepared when finally, Operation Sindoor began. And now we saw the recent bomb blast in Delhi, in which, 10, 12 people were killed. It was a serious attack. But Mr. Modi's government seems to have played these two incidents very differently. And today, if you see the cabinet resolution that was passed, it simply talks of anti-national forces. There is no reference to Pakistan anymore. The P word is absent from the government's formulation. Why do you think the government has changed tack on this?
The reason is very obvious. Because you will recall that after Pahalgam, we had said to ourselves, to our own people, and to the world that any act of terror now will be treated as an act of war against India. And if there is an act of war, then you go to war against the perpetrator. You punish the perpetrator. And in Pahalgam, we clearly established told the world that it was Pakistan which was behind this. In the case of Delhi, we have not used the P word, as you said. So if we use the P word, and this is in the heart of India, in the capital of India, in Delhi, where such a horrendous act of terror has taken place. If we recognize this as an act of terror, then we have to go to war. And who do we go to war with? We go to war with Pakistan, with its consequences. So actually, if you look at the whole episode, India is withdrawing from that position, which Prime Minister Modi had taken after Pahalgam, and tried to prove to India and to the world and that he is a very strong person and he will not tolerate any act of terror. Now we have an act of terror in the capital city of the country, and we are just avoiding to calling it an act of terror or blaming Pakistan for it.
Mr. Sinha, staying with India and its approach to the world, we all, you've been finance minister as well. So we saw that India was buying a lot of oil, or Indian companies were buying a lot of oil from the Russians. Now it seems that the purchases are going to come down, and they have been coming down. How do you see the Modi government's approach to Russia? Would you see it as a sign of independence that in defiance of the US, we continue to buy Russian oil? Or would you see it as that at the first sign of bullying by Donald Trump, we've given up and we've agreed to draw down the supplies? How do you look at this issue?
I look at it as a sign of capitulation to Trump. We have clearly capitulated to Trump. We were buying cheap crude oil from Russia. Russia has been a consistent friend of India, as you're aware. And it was cheaper oil. There was no reason why we should not. And our purchases of Russian crude went up from around 1% to 40% of our total crude purchases. And it was cheap, though it's another matter that the benefit was not passed on to the consumers, to you and me. But the fact remains that we were buying cheaper crude oil from Russia. Now, the US has today imposed sanctions on two of their firms. But consistently, Trump was putting pressure on India publicly and telling us, don't buy Russian crude, don't buy or stop buying Russian crude. And ultimately, we capitulated. Ultimately, we have stopped buying crude from the major Russian companies which were supplying the crude to India.
So, in a sense, our foreign policy today, I mean, Trump is bullying not just us; he's bullying a lot of people. So, if India, such a big power, a big country, if India capitulates, what hope is there for other countries? I mean, I'm sure the rest of the world is also watching how India is dealing with or not dealing with the United States now.
No, we are in a very difficult situation, and I think uh, we should use all our diplomatic resources to get out of this situation, because it cannot go on. I mean, you can't have a situation where Pakistan is close to China. It is also close to US now. Russia and Pakistan have been coming closer. So we seem to have, compared to Pakistan, we seem to have no friends. And when Operation Sindoor took place, there was not one country which stood with India except the Taliban in Afghanistan, and condemned the Pakistanis for their terror attack. Not even the countries in our neighborhood. So, if you ask me, quite clearly, I find that India is today, despite all our past efforts and propaganda, we seem to have been completely isolated. And we have now got into a situation where we have drifted away even from the US.
You talked about the Taliban, Mr. Sinha. I wanted to ask you, we've had this phenomena of two Taliban ministers visiting Delhi, their foreign minister and now their industries or commerce minister. And you rightly pointed out that they were the only country that sort of supported us. So how do you see this change? I mean, here we have this hardline Hindu government, so espouse or claiming to espouse the cause of Hindus in India. How does this sit with this kind of dalliance with the Taliban? What sense do you make of it? I mean, to me, it looks like another episode of the world going completely topsy turvy.
Two very fundamentalist groupings coming together. That's how I would look at it. That here you have Hindu fundamentalism, there you have Islamic fundamentalism, and the two are getting along beautifully with each other. But having said that, I'll also say that it's always been India's policy to cultivate Pakistan. It's also been our policy that we will deal with the regime in place in the country with which we are.
So you're saying it was always a policy to cultivate Afghanistan?
It was always our policy to cultivate Afghanistan. In fact, I'd like to tell you that when I took over in the External Affairs Ministry, one of the earliest trips that I made was not only to our immediate neighbors, but also to Afghanistan. And I had a very successful visit there. And I realized how much goodwill we enjoyed with the people of Afghanistan. So, that is something which we should keep on cultivating. Afghanistan, for various reasons, is now or was always very important for us, and we are not looking at the kind of regime which has taken over in Afghanistan. If the Taliban is in power there, we'll have to deal with Taliban. If the military is in power in Myanmar, we'll have to deal with the military in Myanmar. So that's been our policy. And it's easier when two fundamentalist forces get along with each other, as you said. So that is as far as Afghanistan is concerned. But going back to what we were discussing, that Taliban in Afghanistan was the only government which had supported us during Operation Sindoor. Nepal did not, Bhutan did not, Maldives did not, Sri Lanka did not. There's no question of Bangladesh supporting us now. And
but what is your sense, Mr. Sinha? Because Mr. Modi's projection of this himself as a strong man has a lot of international baggage attached to it. He's clearly selling himself as you said, Vishwaguru. We had this G20 tamasha. It was massive. So how, I mean, are people so gullible that they will take, they are not seeing what is happening? I mean, is it that people don't understand that Mr. Modi actually looks very weak internationally? And as you said, India is quite isolated, and that has a lot to do with the personality of the prime minister as well.
There is a great deal of difference, between the sky and the earth as far as the projection of Mr. Modi as a leader is concerned, especially at the global level, and the reality now. There is a huge perception problem there. And I'll also admit that lots of people in this country, in our country, are influenced or impressed by the fact that Mr. Modi is a world leader, because this is how he's projected. It goes to the ridiculous level, as you'll recall, of a meeting taking place of global leaders and Mr. Modi walking in front and the BJP going great guns about it and saying, look at our leader, he's become the leader of the world because he's walking in front. So but there are people uninformed people who think it's all true, and Mr. Modi's Vishwaguru image may not be very relevant in the Vishwa, but it is very, very potent here in India.
So from here, what does India do? We are also isolated in the Gulf, where Modi ji counts his allies. He looks at the Saudis, he looks at UAE, he looks at Qatar, he looks at all these countries as great allies. So, I mean, we are not just isolated in the subcontinent today, we are also isolated in West Asia. I mean, that is, other than Israel, we really don't see, and of course the Saudis. But the Saudis are, everybody seems to be plowing their own furrow. So how does India deal with this situation now, really? What steps do we take?
Mr. Modi was away to Saudi Arabia, as you'll recall, when perhaps Pahalgam took place. And he has been cultivating Saudi Arabia. There's no quarrel with that. But the point is, it has not led to anything. And the recent moves by Saudi Arabia will clearly show that, like Turkey, they'll be more with Pakistan than India in case there was a conflict between these two countries. So all our efforts, or Mr. Modi's efforts to cultivate Saudi Arabia, has fallen flat on its face. So we don't have friends there. We don't have friends in the Gulf. We don't have friends in East Asia, in ASEAN, in our immediate neighborhood, in the wider world. As I said, even Russia is looking more at its interests than at India's interest. And if it suits Russia to deal with Pakistan, they will.
So we haven't mentioned the C word so far in SpeakEasy in our program today. How do you referred to China in our earlier discussion as to how even Trump is looking at it as the G2, and how, he speaks reverentially about China. We've seen recently that they've had a conversation, and, there's been an invitation extended to Trump to go to China. So all these things are happening. But with India, we've had the conflict with China. When the Vajpayee government was in power, a lot of efforts were made to improve relationships with the Chinese. How do you see, with this, some look at China in a very aggressive fashion. Some see it as a country which is rising. What is your perception? How do you look at India-China relations? Does the rise of China globally have any implications for India?
It has huge implications for India. As I told you earlier, There was a time when the world used to look upon India and China almost as equals. And they were looking at India all the time as a counterpoise to China in Asia. I think all that has become a thing of the past. China has left India far, far behind. In as far as economic power is concerned, they are far ahead of us. And because of the economic power, their military power is far ahead of us. So whenever they want, they can give us a bloody nose on our borders. This is what we saw in Galwan when 20 of our brave hearts were killed. And China is continuously needling India. China is also continuously improving its infrastructure along the Sino-Indian border. China is a huge, huge threat to India going forward. And China and US coming together is bad news for India. Because we'll lose even more our international relevance if these two countries come together. And that little advantage that we had as a counterpoise to China in Asia, that also we will lose. So the rise of China has been singular. Unfortunately, India has not been able to keep pace with the rise of China as much as we would have liked to. And today, they are a global power compared only to the US. There is no other country in the world which is closer to China as far as economic and military power is concerned. So that is China's position. We are nowhere compared to that.
I'll also, literally my last question now will be on India-Pakistan relations. You were External Affairs Minister when Mr. Vajpayee made that celebrated visit for the SAARC summit, and a comprehensive understanding was arrived at between India and Pakistan. That looks today to be absolutely in the distant past. We have no contact virtually with the Pakistanis. There are no road links, there are no rail links, no one is coming. The diplomacy is also virtually in a complete freeze situation. So how do you think India needs to deal with Pakistan? We have no contact. The Modi government has absolutely no interest or has displayed no interest in contact. How do you think India has to deal with Pakistan? Because, as you pointed out earlier, we have faced very serious terrorist incidents. One incident, we have blamed Pakistan directly, and another incident, we have not blamed them at all. So how does India deal with the issue of Pakistan and the country of Pakistan?
There are two ways in which we can deal with it. One is the Vajpayee Manmohan Singh way. As Vajpayee said, you can change your friends, you can't change your neighbor. So you have to have friendly relations with Pakistan. It is in the interest of both countries. If we want to progress economically, if we want to give a good life, a decent standard of living to our people, then we can't continue to have hostile relationship. This was the basic premise on which Vajpayee worked. And Vajpayee was, of course, a BJP prime minister of this country, the first one. Now we seem to have drifted away from that model. The other model, as I said, was to just keep Pakistan at a distance, not have any relationship with Pakistan. The Modi government has opted for the second model. But this model will succeed or will have any relevance, Amit, if we were able to stop cross-border terrorism. If we made ourselves so strong that we will not allow any terrorist act to take place sponsored by Pakistan on our territory. But we have not achieved that. We are vulnerable. Maybe we are even careless. So this model, the second model, is not working and will not work as long as we are not able to stop terrorism. If we want, therefore, to stop terrorism, we have to make peace with Pakistan. That's as clear as daylight.
Do you think your voice would be an isolated voice in today's India?
It will be at the present time. It will be an isolated voice. You talked about my visit to Pakistan in January 2004, but after that, as a member of parliament and as just an activist, I've gone to Pakistan many times, and all the time the effort was that we should be able to bring peace between the two countries. There track 2 and all that is completely over. Track 2, track 1.5, all this is over. Nobody is talking to anyone in Pakistan because the government doesn't want anyone to talk to Pakistan. So it is the responsibility of the government of India, therefore, enhanced responsibility to ensure that Pak-sponsored cross-border terrorism does not succeed.
Mr. Sinha, thank you so much for talking to SpeakEasy. We leave it here for today, but I do hope that you will give us another opportunity to speak to us, because the global affairs, as we discussed earlier in the program, are all up in the air. The world seems topsy-turvy, and the Taliban coming to Delhi, a former Bangladeshi prime minister being sentenced to death and living in exile in Delhi. All these are just manifestations in our own neighborhood of how crazy things are. That's the only word that can be used, crazy. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Sinha, for joining us for SpeakEasy in Frontline. Thank you so much.
Thank you.